If I was God, I'll just be like, hey, here's the deal. Not like, I'm going to give you a puzzle and some of you are going to figure it out.
I know that the Old Testament not only explicitly condones the ownership of other human beings as private property, but gives detailed instructions about exactly how to buy and indeed take them, sometimes including as sexual property. But don't you know?
And put a 1 in the chat if you're not familiar with the instructions on slavery in the Bible, which I'm sure very many of you are not familiar with. Bill says, to my mind, the real issue is cultural chauvinism that arises in any group that feels their culture is superior. For example, Westerners seem to think that all the world wants is Western liberal democracy. I think the real issue is that everyone thinks their outlook is the best outlook and everyone else should want it. That is true, independent of religion. I agree. However, I don't think that this being a problem, I guess more specifically this being a problem, I don't think that cultural chauvinism, the effects of the chauvinism are a problem. I do not think that the chauvinism itself is a problem. Meaning, I don't think it's wrong or bad to think that America has the best, that America has the best culture, that America is where you want to be, that, Western culture is better than Islamic culture, all that kind of stuff. It's when again, it's the second part when we go and say, okay, because we are right, you have to live like we want to live. That's the problem. That's the problem. And it absolutely is independent of religion. I forgot what I asked. What was the I always do this. Sorry, guys. I'm on my game tonight. The Bible. Slavery verses in the Bible. And it's right there. So we start off right on top. Ephesians 6, chapter 6, verses 5-8. Paul states, slaves, be obedient to your human masters with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart as to Christ. 30 plus. All right. So let's just go down the list. 1 Corinthians 7:21. Were you a slave when you were called? Don't let it trouble. What in the? Don't let it trouble you. Although if you can gain your freedom, do so. All right. So they say, hey, if you can get out, but you still a slave. Peter, chapter 2:16. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Where is the real? There we go. Deuteronomy. Okay. If a slave has taken refuge with you, do not hand them over to their master. Oh, that one actually sounds good. Deuteronomy 24:7. If someone is caught kidnapping a fellow Israelite and treating or selling them as a slave, the kidnapper must die. You must purge evil from among you. Okay, so we got some good ones and some bad ones. Fair enough. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and sincerity. Oh, we read that one already. And as masters, treat your slaves the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven. There's no favoritism with him. Long story short, it's whatevs. It's whatevs. Zippy said, to be fair, the Earth being the center of the solar system, etc., was more due to the limits of science. As for slaves, the Bible was made an era of functional slave empires. So, second part, completely agree. I would think that if a god knew what was going to happen in 2023, then in 5 BC or 30 AD, he would maybe not inspire shit like this, but and to the first part, also very true. However, the issue was not the fact that they didn't know. It was what they did to Galileo when he was like, hey, wait, look what I found out. And they were like, no, God said this, so you die. Now you die. That's the issue. I agree. But what does the UN do? Tell everyone in the world to be more like liberal democracies. I mean, hey, you will not find me dick riding the UN. I am right there with you. Thank you, brother. Thank you. I mean, the numbers are low, but you guys came through. Like, honestly, This has been the worst stream. I am. Thank you. Bill said a major aspect of the international course is to force the concepts of liberal democracy on the world. I think it goes as far as what we call war crimes. And this is kind of why I'm like, at the end of the day, unless it's like Holocaust level, like Mao Zedong level, Stalin level, maybe let them figure it the fuck out. Maybe we don't need to be involved. Just maybe.
Only explicitly condones the ownership of other human beings as private property, but gives detailed instructions about exactly how to buy and indeed take them, sometimes including as sexual property. But don't you know that the abolitionist movement was essentially Judeo-Christian in origin? Yes, I know that Galileo was shown the instruments of torture by the Inquisition for having the temerity to suggest that the Earth might orbit the sun rather than the other way around. But
that, again, Zippy, that is the part. It's not about the fact that they had it wrong. It's about the fact that they wanted to kill him. Bill says, nah, they talk about human rights violations, but human rights as defined by Western culture. It's not just war crimes. No, I agree with you. I'm saying that's what it should be. Like what we, if we were all going to sit down and determine like, okay, what are the things that cross the line that we should go over to another country, another continent and get involved militarily? Those things. However you want to define them, not as the UN defines it. I'm saying as we define them. Is it going to be more just typical internal conflict in an organization where Galileo got caught in the crossfire? I mean, anything is possible. I wasn't there, so it could be. I cannot say that I know that that's not the case, but I mean, that's certainly not the way the Christians tell it. And you would think that if anybody else would have a reason to twist the story in the favor of Christians, it would be the Christians. Still some classical liberalism with the Western construct. Yeah, fair enough. Some of the rules and games are probably a good idea. Yeah, just the bare minimum stuff. That like, okay, if you're, if you're just going after innocent civilians, just going house to house, mowing people down, like, okay, maybe your government can deal with that first. But it's the government doing. Okay, now we can talk about getting involved with the military. What, the government's just in this other country is just going door to door, spraying bullets and killing innocent people. Like, okay, now we can have a conversation as to what are we going to do. But before that, mind your own business.
But don't you know that the scientific revolution, which he authored, was essentially Judeo-Christian in origin? I'd find it funny if it wasn't so offensive.
So if you're missing what he's doing, is showing the dichotomies. Is that here's the good in religion, but here's the bad in religion. Here's the bad and here's the good in that the history of religion. Here's the bad in the history of religion, and it's just one for one.
To the people who established these very developments against the very religious traditions that now want to claim them as their own.
Okay, so I would buy that, except for the fact that many of the people that you mentioned in these contexts explicitly counted themselves as religious believers and were speaking in the name of the religion while they're doing it. So to take the abolitionist movement as an example, I mean, William Wilberforce, obviously a tremendously religious person and a big believer in the New Testament. Isaac Newton, obviously deeply ensconced in the New Testament, right? Yeah, certainly important to the scientific revolution. The point about religion, and this is why when I wrote my book, I have to name the title now and plug myself because that's the way it works.
To wave around,
the right side of history. But the reason that I talked about how reason and moral purpose made the West is because I think that one of the fundamental precepts of at least Judeo-Christian religion is that when God gives a text or a set of ideas to human beings, he expects us to use our reason to apply to those texts. And
that's a whole can of worms right there. If I was God, I would just be like, hey, here's the deal. Not like, I'm going to give you a puzzle, and some of you are going to figure it out, and some of you are going to get so close, but not really. Zuby said to Bill, the only problem with democracy is it shifts to a slave empire ran by a socialist nobility. The UN is a socialist communist organization. Choice come around? Yep.
And so the sort of evolution of interpretation is part of the religious tradition. I mean, that's always been the case in my religion anyway. So I can only, I always hesitate to speak on behalf of other people's religions because I don't know them nearly as well as I know my own. So when I talk about sort of the application of reason to tradition in the religious tradition, obviously we have books and books and books of texts discussing and debating these very ideas. And the idea of religious debate has always been central to the idea of Judeo-Christian religion. And when it hasn't been, it's been seen as repressive and has spawned then other Christian movements that then argue with the original movement and end up generating in almost Hegelian fashion some new form of interpretation. The point that I'm making is that outside that framework, it doesn't exist. Meaning that once if the argument is over interpretation of particular biblical verses in a context in which there is a God who puts certain moral precepts beyond human judgment.
Okay, so if it's based on your interpretation of the verses, basically what you just said, if it's based on the interpretation,
those arguments you can have without threatening the entire social structure. What is very difficult is to have a social.
So he's saying if you have different interpretations of religious text, that doesn't have to crumble society. Fair enough.
Structure at all in the absence of fundamental moral precepts that are presupposed by.
What?
Those arguments you can have without threatening the entire social structure. What is very difficult is to have a social structure at all in the absence of fundamental moral precepts that are presupposed by everyone.
Oh, okay. So what he's saying is the absence of a fundamental moral precepts that are presupposed by everyone, having a code of morality. That's what he's saying. What's really hard is to have a society where not everybody agrees on the rules. So the American identity fits right in there and perfectly solves every issue that Ben has had so far. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that clip, check out the full live stream link in the bio and catch me live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. See you there.